And we're there. We're on the internet. We've made it to the internet.
Actually, on the internet?
Yes.
The bit of the internet where people can see us?
Yes, yeah. That's the bit we're on. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's helpful. How's it going, Lloyd?
Yeah. Pretty good. I've immediately remembered that this is always how this starts.
We have to ask you how you are. It's very polite.
Save the banter till you go live instead of blowing it all before you hit the button.
Right.
Well, what you've done there, Barker, is already blown who our special guest is.
Yeah.
Who?
I have a top secret special guest.
Top secret special guest.
I'm just here to play Pac-Man.
I mean, that's ideal.
Pretty good. Hello. Hi. Welcome to the stream.
Welcome to the stream.
This is the Dias Cast. It's not a podcast, despite the name.
It is the seminal RPG podcast.
That's right.
You're fine.
Yes, I remember talking about seed quite a lot in the previous.
Yes, that's what we've mainly covered generally in the last 40 or so episodes we've done. I don't know how many there are, but a lot of the time that is what comes up. Part of the phrasing. We should just dive in. First of all, I've just been really rude. Barker, how are you?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for bringing me on today. Thanks for flying me in. That's the joke we always make in podcasts. Thanks for flying me over.
Got you all the way here
and putting me up in that Motel 6, Dublin.
Yep, it's a real kid.
Yeah,
we blew all the money on the flight, right?
So. Yep. Well, thanks for making it all that way. I'm sure your arms are tired, but we are.
That's right. What we're actually viewing is Barker post at con, the aftermath, shall we say, a very successful online con, which raised a lot of money for a very deserving charity. How are you feeling after it, Barker?
I'm good. I'm feeling tired. I felt yesterday was like do you ever get so tied to a single project, because we're all creative people, you get so tied to a single project that when it's done, you have this feeling of liberation the day after where you kind of don't really understand what to do with yourself. That's how I feel often. But it was the good kind where I determined at the beginning of the day, I'm going to just listen to where my heart fire leads, and I'm just going to jump into that, whatever that is. And I got more creative work done yesterday than the average day. And so it was good. I'm feeling good after the con. We had a really cool Discord meeting in the AbTab Discord this morning. And I feel like the best part of the convention, live, in person, and this first inaugural online, was that the people in the community are far closer now. I feel like everyone knows each other a little bit more, some by name, others by handle. And I think we're going to see a lot more action in the group because of it. And we should all carry that torch as best we can.
Absolutely. And what better way to start than jumping straight in to devising what we all love, devising role-playing games and the execution of them. We're doing something a little bit different on the Dias Cast. We are starting something that I discovered the title of today because Lloyd just posted it. CampaignForge. Sure. Lloyd, do you want to explain to the good folk what we're doing?
We are going to make a campaign from the very beginning until about session 2, I guess. And all of the stuff that goes into the preparation for a campaign and the build up to it and what kind of work you as a GM have to do to get a campaign going, and all of the pre-work and how important that is and how easy the pre-work can make running the actual game is the big thing for me. Because for me, the session zero and the work I do before I start the game is the most important work of the game. I think it sort of runs itself after a while. You know? So
too.
Our plan is to do a bunch of these sessions with specific tasks in mind. So today is the conception, which conceptualizing. Not the conception. That's a different thing.
Gone from seed to conception. Yeah. We're doing the whole cycle, Lloyd.
Christ. Can't get away from it.
Can't get away from it. It's impossible.
Kinda-
Conceptualizing a game. Okay, so what is that?
It's why are you gonna run this specific game? Why this game? Why have you chosen to run this campaign and not the other 40 ideas that are bouncing around in your head or on books that you own or whatever?
So
Why-
like this is pre-session 0, right?
Yes.
This is before you've gotten the players. Do you have any idea what the players want?
Not yet. No.
Okay. So you're just trying to figure out, I guess, as a GM, what it is you are interested in.
This is the selfish bit. Yeah.
I love the selfish bit.
Yeah.
Selfish bit's the
I
best.
love the selfish bit of conception. The selfish bit of conception is the
Is
best.
there any other part? This is the bit where you decide as a GM what will be fun about the game for you. Well, why you're choosing the thing usually is because you want to explore the world in some way, right?
Yes.
Usually.
Yeah.
So this is the part where you go, I want to run this game because XYZ. And yes, that's the basic idea here.
Now, usually you decide that you want to run a particular style of game or a particular system or anything because you're something has sparked inspiration within you. Whether that be that you've been watching a particular kind of film or TV that's based in a certain world or a certain setting, that invariably is quite often the case when it particularly with us. We like play Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, Game of Thrones, that sort of thing. And then you get things like inspiration from history, from particular historical events or particular time periods in history. And the only other one I could really think of was things in real life, in nature, for example. Say, for example, you go on a big hike and you see a giant hill and you think, oh, this looks like there'd be a really good place for a battle scene on this hill or something. I don't know.
I think people can also get inspired by if you run modules. This is not really going to be about people who are running like pre-written games because you're making it yourself. But people can get inspired from those things to make their own thing. So like, I have lots of little books that would make me go, ooh, I could run a campaign about this. Even if it's not designed for it. Like I have like Mothership by Tuesday Night Games have like these great little books and they're really packed full of content and I could like easily go to a page and be like, that's a campaign, and like pull that out and mess with it. But yeah, I think usually for me it tends to be that I watch something or I play a game, a video game, and then I go, I want to run this as a campaign. And then that lasts for about a week, and then I no longer want to do that. You know?
Well, I think that's very important. I think that's something we're going to have to come back to.
Yeah.
Is that exact thing? Barker, can you think of anything else we've missed there?
No, I think that you spoke to something that hit me in a good way. I mentioned earlier heart steering. It's like I'm watching an episode of Doctor Who, and I'm like, oh man, I really want to run Doctor Who. Right in that moment, that's an instant where all of a sudden you realize that you make that connection between some sort of external media and, oh, I bet the players would like this. I bet I'd be able to like create this situation where, I was listening to a podcast the other day on the USS Indianapolis, which sank, and then the sailors were stuck in the ocean with sharks for days, and the sharks were just like feeding on these people. And I'm like, I want to know how players would react to something like this. Maybe a little brutal for some players, but in that moment, oftentimes we don't listen to what our brain is saying it wants to do, or we're not listening to it fast enough, because like Lloyd said, it lasts a week and then it's replaced by something else, or it just kind of disintegrates and you can't really get in touch with that same feeling again. So I think that this is a really cool learning experience for me, I think. Is
the Indianapolis the one that he talks about in Jaws? You ever see the eyes of a shark?
I think it is.
Yeah, it is.
Like a doll's eyes. Right?
It is one of the best scenes.
It's incredible, yeah.
But you've also made it very funny by saying it like that, Lloyd. So very good.
The dog's eyes.
That's actually a really interesting point as well, because when picking a historical event as your point of inspiration, I suppose you can then have moments like perhaps not as well acted and directed as that moment in Jaws, but you get to see different perspectives from the people experiencing those events. So I suppose that's quite a good way of exploring both history and role-playing games.
I'm currently going through it very heavily because I picked up Troy Total War, which is...
Oh, nice. How is it?
Oh, yeah.
Very briefly.
I like it. I don't think it's great, but I like it.
Okay.
It's a saga, so it's like not a full game.
Sure.
But I like it. I am very into Troy and the Iliad, just full stop.
Yes.
And the terrible movie, I love it so much.
What do you mean terrible, Lloyd? It's perfect every way.
I adore it just so much. And so currently my brain is like, you should run a Troy campaign, do it now. And I also know that that's like a lot of work and requires tons of research if I pick the players that I would pick for it, because they'll know more about it than me. So then I have to sort of like pace myself and go, maybe you should wait for a week and see if you still want to run a Troy game then.
Well, that's something that I actually put in my notes that we stumbled upon early, so we might as well just address it now. And one of the big questions I wrote in my notes in capital letters is this actually a game? Barker brought up Doctor Who earlier. I actually invited Barker to play in a Doctor Who campaign that never manifested, because I realized what I was doing instead of planning a campaign was actually writing my own fanfic brief of what a season of Doctor Who would look like.
Right.
Every year on Facebook, I get the memory of that trailer, and I get sad and happy at the same time. I tell my wife, I'm like, we need to watch Doctor Who, and that's what happens. So no, it's a positive thing.
I made a trailer for it. Oh my goodness me! Same thing happened. I did the same with Batman. I guess I'd watched a Batman film or I'd read a Batman graphic novel, and I thought, I want to run a Batman game, and then realized, wait, the players can't be Batman. They'll have to be police people in the GCPD. And then it's just like, this isn't really a game I want to play. No. And then I just abandoned it. So
isn't that part of the process?
Yes.
Is figuring out, like, so instead of being like, okay, well, let's abandon that, maybe be like, okay, hold up. All right, so we're not going to run a Batman game, but we are going to run a Gotham City PD game. Or we are going to run a Doctor Who game, but everybody's going to play as Daleks. That was a stupid
one. That's a good one.
But like, okay, maybe the Doctor is gone and you're all the companions piloting the TARDIS or something, like a special sort of episode.
Yeah. I think the question, is this a game, is really important, because watching a movie and thinking, it would be cool to do this, but the movie is like Lord of the Rings, like you can't play as the Fellowship, really, you know? And so like...
You can't play as Gandalf for sure.
No. And so asking yourself,
just keep coming back. Yeah.
Asking yourself, is this actually a game, or is this just an idea that I like? Is this just a setting that I like? Is a really important question, because it's easy to just get whipped up in the fervor of being into something for a little bit, you know?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And there are other outlets for this. As I mentioned about the Doctor Who thing, I realized I was basically just writing a draft of what my season of Doctor Who would look like. So I did that, and I wrote it out into like a couple of pages in a Google Doc, and then I was done. I had poured that energy somewhere, and I was able to leave it alone. I know for a fact, Lloyd, that you've posted things in the AbTab Facebook group where you've literally said, I'm putting this here so I don't run this as a game.
Yep. And sometimes I even still, if I have like a really strong urge, I'll write an interest post in a Google Doc and then put it away, so I don't have to like get people excited about the idea of I might run this and then like not run it because in a week it's gone from my interest, you know? So one of the tests for me is like, is this still an interest a month on or whatever, you know? And like with some things that's always going to be true. So like with Isloft or like Middle Earth or certain other settings, I'm always going to be into running and playing them. And Game of Thrones and stuff like that. But I think like it's good to be sure before you commit to running a long-term campaign that this is something you're going to be running and want to be running for a long time.
Is there anything else that you can think of that helps you identify if this is a game or not, other than just whether you're still interested in it in a week?
I would think about what the players will be doing game to game, session to session. Because like with Batman, like, okay, great, they're cops in Gotham. What does a game look like? It's not going to be like encountering the Joker or any of the cool stuff. It's going to be like paperwork and, you know, like
No.
like calls to like a house in the middle of the night because the music is too loud. Like, I don't know, but it's like, what is the day to day of these characters like? And is that going to be interesting for you to run and for the players to play? You know,
it is a good point, and I mean, you could, I suppose you could argue you could do a GCPD game, but I think when there's only limited
climate, maybe
maybe not, but if you're being completely ineffectual, like if you're part of the Gotham Police Department, or if you're playing any character in DC Comics, like, and you're then told, well, you can't actually affect anything about this world. Like, you can't just walk up and shoot the Joker. Like, that was an example or whatever. Like, you know, you find yourself becoming more limited, I think. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe
I like to think that there's always a way to give up once you have that initial idea. You have control over it, and then if you get in your head that the first step is to kind of release a little bit of that control and be like, okay, I want to run a Batman game. No, you know what? I want to run a Gotham game. No, you know what? I want to run a single one shot where all the players are in Gotham City PD and they stumble across a supervillain to be, like someone who has discovered the ability to become a villain. Okay, that's the game I can run. So it's not necessarily, is this a game for me, as much as it is, okay, how can I make this a game? How can I turn this into a game that some players would find interesting? Because it's so easy for me to be like, yeah, this isn't a game. Well, I just haven't thought about it enough to make it into one.
I think the important consideration for me is the game that you can make the same as the game you want? You know,
that's what I was about to ask. Because
you can run a game as Gotham PD or whatever, but will it be the same as the game that you initially envisioned and wanted to play? Will it scratch the same itch? You know,
Sure.
We ran into that we played Freed from the Yoke, and initially we thought this would be like great houses, and actually in practice it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. We did like a lot of build up to that game and work in the lead up, and it sort of felt a little bit, well, it wasn't wasted, but we built a setting basically, but it didn't really do what we wanted it to do. And so I think that's worth considering too. Like, if I want to run a game where the players are heroes in ancient Greece and they're going to Troy, what does that look like day to day? And will that be as interesting as if they are Achilles and Agamemnon and various other people? You know, you can run a game in those settings, definitely, but is it the game that you still want to run?
Sure.
Yeah, all very good points, I find. I suppose the next thing to consider with the idea, once you have the idea and you decide that, yes, absolutely, this is a game that I want to run, then you have to identify the scope of the game. You've got to find out how, well, if this game has legs. Is this a one-shot? Is it a trilogy? Is it a campaign? How do we work that out?
You can kind of just decide, I think.
Yeah,
sometimes, but I think you're right. Some games are much better lended towards like short, punchy. Like, you can really scratch the itch of, I want to play a game as a cyber samurai in a one shot, or I'm watching Black Sails at the moment and I want to do a pirate game. You can do a one shot. But I think there are some kinds of games that require more investment to get the character stuff out of it, to get like the depth of the setting and stuff. And I tend to find that like Game of Thrones, Middle Earth, like those are settings that don't really appeal to me that much for one shots. Appeal to me much more as games in which I live in the world for a long time. So it's also a question for you of how much content do you think you can make for the game? Like, do you think you have enough content in your head and in the world to run a campaign because you watched Underworld the other day? Do you think that's a full campaign of Vampire that you can run? Or is it a one-shot where you are a death dealer? Or is it a trilogy where you play as like a werewolf or something? You know, like those are...
Yeah.
Thinking about the scope and what you want out of it is really important. Because I think like saying, I'm going to run a whole campaign of this, and you actually really only wanted to do a one-shot, you really, like, your itch has been scratched at that point, then you find players who are disappointed because they signed up for a big thing. You know, I think it's sort of safer to start with a one shot, and if you all like it, then you can continue. But that also like, I think it's better to be clear about what the scope is up front and say, this is what I want from it, and it won't go past this. And then if you all get to the end and you all decide you really do want to, you can, but it's better to be clear up front, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
No, now what's the scope of the player's knowledge of the setting? You know, if we're doing the USS Indianapolis and they all understand what a battleship is, and they all understand what a shipwreck is, and they understand what sharks are, then that's a one shot, right? But if I'm running a game in a homebrew setting and we're going to really need to explore what this setting is, at least in the session 0 and maybe beyond, it might be worth it to say, okay, this is going to be at least 3 sessions, because there's going to be a lot that the players need to learn about the setting, not necessarily the characters, but the players need to learn in order to fully understand who their characters are and how they fit in a world.
Yeah, agreed. And I think, I think the nail was hit really when you speak to how much you know about the setting, how much you as a GM feel you can handle the content from that setting. For example, we all know and love Middle Earth a great deal. It's all right.
Of course I kid. Of course.
Fine.
Jeez. I died a little bit just now. I can't believe I betrayed myself so greatly.
But we could all run a campaign in Middle Earth because we all know it at the back of our hand, you know. Not to say it's easy by any stretch of the imagination, but it is, you know, the material is there. But
expansive.
if you're, of course. But yeah, like you say, Barker, if you're dealing with a particular historical event or something that's very contained, then naturally you're going to be looking at a shorter game, I suppose.
Now, this series that you're doing on the Dice Cast, is it pertaining to someone who has decided, I want to run a campaign?
That's the idea, yeah.
That I have my idea. It is a game. I understand kind of what the PCs will be doing. I understand the scope, and I think this is a long-term campaign, right?
Yeah. That's the goal.
Where the hell do you go from there?
Right.
That's the next bit, Barker.
That's the next bit.
You're welcome.
What an incredible segue.
Very good segue.
Not your first rodeo.
So where do we go from here?
Where do you go from here? Okay, so you've picked your game. You've picked your...
Can I chuck something out too? I don't want to interrupt you because you're the host and your image is at the top of the pyramid here, so I don't want to do anything that'll get me smacked. But when you start a game, I like to subscribe to the theory that all the players have is that character sheet. That's all they get control over. That's the thing that they make and develop over the course of the game. That's the one thing they have. And so you as a GM should never interfere with that. You should give them that agency full and complete over that character sheet and that character. This is your chance before the session 0 to decide what it is you want, to decide the game that you want to run, like the system, to decide perhaps the setting, and the genre. Maybe genre is a little bit more session 0 because, you know, I know some players who would love Iskloft, and I know other players who might be like, oh, you know what? Yeah, let's do Iskloft, but you know, let's tone the brutality down a little bit. So you don't want to move too far ahead before the session 0. But do you feel that making that choice about a campaign setting is kind of in line with this pre-session 0 process?
I think by the time that you get to asking players and having a session 0, you want to know, at least in your head, like what the setting is, what the scope is, what kind of story it will be, roughly.
Okay.
By which I mean, like, is this a game in which we are going to be big ass heroes, you know, kicking down doors, saving the world? Is it a game where we are 6 farmers who live in a village in the middle of nowhere and strange events happen? Is it a game where we are the crew of a ship, or is it, you know, like, have that in your head, like what is the rough, because you're the GM, you have to tell the story partially, so you want to be interested in what the story is going to be, right? So usually for me it's like, okay, you're a house in the north of Westeros, that's enough for me to go, you know. But
yeah.
And then you bring players in and we'll get to that later, but like find out what they're interested in and stuff like that. But I think before you get to the point where you're asking players, you want to know what's the setting, what's the system, how long, what kind of game is it in terms of length, and what kind of game is it in terms of the feel and the theme and that.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. I think for some people that may be watching this potentially who have never run a campaign before, like I think we could give some examples because, funnily enough, this is what was on my notes next. For example, your players will have certain roles or certain objectives to fulfill to make this game a game. You know, so there's going on a quest, the traditional one, traveling through a mythical world, or traveling through space with as much fuel as you can get your hands on before you inevitably run out and have to do a shady deal to get more, that kind of thing. There's empire building, which Lloyd mentioned with the Northern House in Westeros example, trying to thrive in a setting that essentially is a brutal one, and one that takes careful planning to survive and to develop. Speaking of surviving, there's survival games as well. Literally you being on a small team having to survive the setting that you're putting this campaign into, or perhaps even you're at war. Perhaps this is a setting like the Trojan War, for example, where every session could potentially be like a big battle, or preparing for the battle next session, for example. I don't know, are there any more that I might have missed there? Probably.
I'm sure,
Almost.
but like, but that was a really solid, a
good cross section. Yeah, I think that's a really important consideration, because that's the bulk of the stuff you're going to be doing as a GM, is like keeping the players on track, at least in the way that I run games and that you run games. I think a lot of it is like keeping them on what they're supposed to be doing, what they have said they want to do, you know. So that's part of it. So I think, yeah, if you decide I'm going to run a game whereby you are just in the wilderness and you've washed up on shore somewhere, you have nothing, try to survive and thrive, that's enough for me to start a game. But it also might be much more involved than that. You might have like a huge amount of world setup, and there might be some overarching like big plots and villains and stuff like that. All of that is also part of making a game. So that's an important consideration to come to now. Like, what kind of game is it going to be?
Well, as we're developing this... Oh, sorry, Barker, go ahead.
No, you. I'm good.
I was going to bring us to the point where we're going to decide that for ourselves. We have already predetermined what we're going to talk about. I don't know why I said that, but I think we should talk about what we've chosen the setting. We're going to go ahead and use the setting of Dragon Grin to create a setting, to create a campaign around. It's a wonderfully in-depth setting. It's quite a brutal setting as well, which I think we'll enjoy exploring quite a lot. But yeah, we have to work out what kind of game we want to create for Dragon Grin.
What do you, you listed, Rob, a little bit earlier, you listed some really great themes. And one of the themes that I think is my favorite that you named was survival. And I think it really fits well with Dragon Grin.
Yes.
You, not just in terms of the fact that it's difficult to live in Dragon Grin because heroes aren't welcome, right? It's kind of like a Sauron has won sort of theme. But also because there are regions like any other good world, and similar to Iskaloft, where the environment itself can kill you. And I think that's a really cool theme to maybe explore at your leisure in your game.
I think when you arrive at the setting, if it's an already published setting or one that you have created, you immediately get like, you know what some of the key themes are going to be. Like, you pick a setting because it has themes, mostly, I think, like you pick a setting because, well, yeah, there's cool stuff in it, but also because a setting tells you a lot about the kind of game you're going to play. So if you're playing in Dragon Grin, bad guys have won, you'll be likely underground, like trying to work quietly and not get noticed and do some good. You know that it's a world of like not black and white morality. right, lots of things from picking the setting. So then you can kind of then, I think from there, what I would do is I would look at which of those themes are most interesting to me, and then sort of focus on which one I want to explore through the game the most, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Well, Barker's mentioned that he's very interested in exploring survival for this discussion. Is one in particular stand out for you, Lloyd?
Basically, always it's going to be rebellion and rising up against tyranny. I love that. In games and in reality.
Yes.
But no, I think like that sense of like, it's also why I love the game Spire, which I've been talking about a little bit of late. It's an amazing game where you play drow who are oppressed by high elves, and you live in this vertical city, and it's all about building a resistance movement, basically. And I think like that's very interesting to me, and that's something that I think works very well as a story just generally. There's always danger if you are the rebels. You get to showcase as a GM how cool the bad guys are, because they're in charge. You get to do like some thought experiments about like, if you were the bad guy and you had all this unlimited power, how would you stop rebels from happening? Kind of thing. That's all very interesting to me as a GM in terms of building a world and playing in a world, you know? So it would be that, probably, the rebellion stuff. What about you?
Yeah, I think my that very much aligns with my interest. To be honest with you, with Dragon Grin, I do like the idea of rebellion. I do like the idea of survival. I know it's a setting of quite diverse regions, so I think I would enjoy exploring each of those and how each of those regions respond and operate under the tyranny of the dismembered lord. So I almost thinking about it just before we began the stream, I imagined it kind of being like a reversal of Lord of the Rings in a way, actually, where you have chosen members from each region, like you have the elves and the dwarves from at the Council of Elrond. You have a similar kind of council happen in Dragon Grin, where people get together in secret to determine how they're going to end the threat.
Oh, you could do an Against the Shadow in Dragon Grin for sure.
Exactly, Against the Shadow, but in Dragon Grin, and try and have all of basically the theme of cooperation between everyone to try and overthrow the great tyranny.
At this point, are you going to be considering specifics to Dragon Grin? Because the Undying Light is an organization in Dragon Grin that is that secret sort of trying to play chess against the Dismembered Lord system in order to eventually overthrow it. Is that is that a little cart before the horse to say, no, I want Undying Light?
I think that's good, because what we're working towards here is an interest post, I think, right? Like, or like if you're not doing it online, then a brief to your players, like here's what I want to run. And so I think specifics like you are going to be part of the Undying Light or the Copper Jackals or something is really useful to know and to say to them immediately. Be like, this is sort of the feel of it. You're like a rebel cell and you're going to be, XYZ. I think that's good. And specifics are always useful to getting people into a setting and enthused, I think. What else can we put in here for Dragon Grin theme-wise?
Well, I've just put into the chat, actually, what campaign would you run in Dragon Grin? So anyone watching now or after the fact, feel free to let us know that. That's a very interesting question that I wasn't thinking of because I was busy typing. Barker.
oh, on the spot. All right, so something that I would want to explore, a theme that I would want to explore in Dragon Grin. I really, really want impending doom, and I mean, and maybe this goes against the campaign theory here, but there should be some sort of looming threat that if you don't act quickly is going to ruin all of your plans and abilities, and it's actively working against you.
Yeah, the thought that I had was pursuit. I imagine it would be really interesting for you to have to try and organize some kind of rebellion whilst constantly on the move. So potentially the main antagonists, other than the Dismembered Lord, could be particular agents of his that are specifically trying to hunt you down. So fleeing across different realms and things like that could be quite interesting.
Like the Nazgul kind of.
It's one of those things where that ties in with the rebel part, where the better you become at being a rebel, the harder it is to be a rebel, because they know who you are and they want to find you specifically, you know? So you need to have like many layers between you and the actual rebellion. So that's cool, I think.
What's something you think your players will like? Because you should probably have some sort of, or usually you'd have some sort of understanding of who's going to be playing.
Mm-hmm.
So if you, I mean, this is obviously just tailored for this podcast, but if you pretend for a moment that you are going to run this game for your usual group, pick a theme that you think they would enjoy.
I think the intricacies of being a good person in a bad place tends to be something that players that I play with enjoy. Moral quandaries and being faced with like no good choices.
Yeah,
it's something that you know.
Yeah, that's definitely one. Another one I thought of was this is basically thinking about our great gaming group, Lloyd, really, but the management of limited resources. I think it'd be quite interesting to play with having to scrabble for everything, really having to make everything count. So you only have a small amount of resources, and if you have difficult decisions, do we? Well, I can't think of an example now, but you know what I mean. Essentially, if you're running like a ragtag rebellion, you're only going to have so much to help you before, you know.
Yeah, one of the things about settings like this, where you are the underdog, is that the impression always is that the Empire or the Dismembered Lord or the Sauron has infinite resources and infinite bad guys, and you can't beat them in a fight. Like, it's not possible. They have everything. They have all of the stuff. They have the best soldiers in the world. They have all of the resources in the world. They are infinite and unstoppable. So I think like that feeling, and then you're like literally counting pennies and like seeing if your sword will hang on another day if you like hammer it in the right place. Like, that feeling is very good, and it adds into a lot of the other sort of themes that we have here of like impending doom and threat and survival.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing that I was thinking of as well, and I think this would be quite a risky one, but it is one that would also make sense in Dragon Grin, is betrayal and treachery. Because as you say, I know, as you mentioned, like the better you get as a rebel, the more infamous you'll become. So like the move anyone would make, the Sheriff of Nottingham does this with Robin Hood, like we put out a reward for his arrest or his capture or his murder, you know. Is that something you'd want in there? Like the potential that any of your allies could think, oh, actually, I might get quite a lot of gold and a nice hold somewhere if I
and like a peaceful life,
these rebels,
safety for
exactly.
my family or dependents or whatever. Like the bad guys only really have to get lucky with one person inside the rebellion who says, I'll do it.
Yeah,
you know, and you as the rebellion have to get lucky every single time.
The reason why I'm a little hesitant of saying that is because I feel, I don't know. I reckon some people, not saying everyone, but I think some people would be quite upset if they got sold out by one of the people that they're playing an RPG with. Is that? I imagine that would be something you'd have to agree on before. Is that something we're open to, or are we completely down for playing a solid group that would rather die than betray their friends and the cause that they work for? Or is that less interesting for that threat not to be there?
I think.
Do you think it's less interesting if it's an NPC?
Agreed.
I think it is less interesting if it's an NPC. I don't think it's not interesting, but I think it's the most shocking is if it's another player. I think that's something that you would talk about in Session Zero and say, okay, the potential is there if you're all okay with it, that one of you will be like secretly approached by the enemy, you know, and you will know something the other players don't, and everyone has to be chill with that and know that that's a possibility. Because you don't want people to be shocked or like upset or whatever.
People might be upset by that. So
But I think if you don't have to say at the start of the game, okay, you're going to be the traitor down the road, because that removes, removes all of the shock and surprise from it. But I think it's worth saying to your players, if that's something you're interested in, like chat with them and ask them, like, are you as a group okay with this hidden information stuff, And
like the option of it being there, it's not necessarily guaranteeing it will happen, but then is it a prophecy that you're making happen by even suggesting it? I suppose you could argue that as well, couldn't you? But yeah, interesting. I don't know. Are there any other themes that we think we could include in this?
I think that's a lot.
Or I think we're pretty good, actually, aren't we?
Yeah.
I think you've covered Dragon Grin pretty well, actually.
So you have these themes in mind. So then you're gonna sort of think about like the setting some more. Like, is there a particular part of the world that you want to play in? Do you want to explore all of it? Those are important questions. But I think, like, where do you start and who are the players is your next big thing, because you've kind of hit your stuff. Like, these are the themes that you want. I think now you can also think about specific circumstances that you might like, the kind of game that we're going to play. So is it going to be a, like you mentioned before, a quest? Like, oh, you have to go to the place and get the thing and save the world with the thing? Or is it going to be a, you live in Dragon Grin, life is hard, you're oppressed, figure it out? Or is it going to be many, many other kinds of things? You're monster hunters, or you are tomb robbers, or you're like whatever, So that's the next big question, is what is the day-to-day of the game? What's the game?
You can harken back a little bit to the initial inspiration that made you want to run the game, like just going pirate shipwreck. Knowing a little bit about the world helps you realize, okay, you know what? That's going to take place in near Varnholm. There's a lot of ships there, and so there's going to be. So okay, now everyone's kind of playing Holmir, who live in and around Varnholm, and that's kind of laying that focus. That said, I just got to put this out there now. If Tim Carney were here, he would say, he would tell you the story about the time that he had a session zero with his players, and he just showed them a map of Dragon Grin and asked them where they wanted to go. And just by looking at the beautiful map, they pointed where they wanted to go, and he started there. And so it's possible that the region itself might be more session zero territory if that's your speed.
But
that's a very good point. Yeah, and that map in particular, each region is, you can tell roughly the kind of characteristics of that region just by looking at it, really, can't you? It's excellently done in that way.
We're going to get
that's a very good point.
Onto in session zero. There's Connor from Dice on Ice made this session zero for our Pariah game, where we used a book called The Perilous Wilds, which is a little supplement, and in it there's this how to start your game, and it's like, who's your character, where are they from, put it on the map, what's an interesting place in the region, put it on the map, and you basically draw on top of, or you create a new map yourself. And so you, as the players, are adding things to the map that they think are interesting, but we'll get to that in the session zero episode, I think. But it is, you're gonna, even if you pick the region, your players are gonna have an impact on it before you start the game. I think even if you're playing in a really established setting, it's good to do that anyway, so you get an impression for what the players actually want to do.
Yeah, definitely.
So then we have to decide what kind of game we're going to run. Like, because we're in Dragon Grin, we could do like every kind of game. You could do, we are Crucian houses, or we're a Crucian house of some power, and we're trying to rise up among the ranks there. Very different game to, we are down in our luck, Grimdal wanderers somewhere trying to, there's, so the civilizations are very, very varied, so you kind of have to start somewhere, I guess, with the kind of game that you want.
Does it ever help you guys to think about scenes? Like, it's hard to do this without railroading, without the fear of railroading a story for the players, but let's, just put a pin in that for a second. But, I can't get this scene out of my head of a Marrow shoving someone's face in the mud while it's raining with their boot. And I just want to do that. Like, I'm just, just to write it down, boot shove, right? this is an idea I'm working on here, but like thinking in terms of scenes that I don't know where we're going to start. I don't know who the players are going to be, who the characters are going to be, but I understand that, you know, we've decided that there's going to be rebellion, some gray morality, what it's like to be a hero in an evil setting. And so I think that the Marrow are going to be a big enemy to the players. So
that scene encapsulates everything that the players need to know in the beginning of the game. Really, it shows that there's this this regime that is more than happy to literally push people down into the mud. That's everything you need to start the session, for sure.
Yeah, you can say a lot with that as an incident or like a start of game. Like it tells you a lot about why the players would want to rise up at all. Like if you open with something like that or you have a scene like that, it's a really good way of being like, this is the world you live in, isn't it shit? You know, like do something. Yeah, I think it's super good to keep in mind like certain kinds of scenes and visuals and stuff like that, or things like Dinner with the Enemy, which is my favorite thing, but like a way that you can interact with the bad guys, because you are the bad guys, right, as the GM. And it's good to keep yourself entertained also. So if you, like me, think the Marrow are the Roman Legion, then you're really into that. And that's something that you're going to want to focus on as the GM and getting them involved, you know? So keeping that in mind as well is important, because if they pick to go to the middle of nowhere where there are no Marrow, then you're like, oh, dang, I kind of wanted to have them involved, you know? If you are going to run a game in Middle Earth and you wanted to interact with the Easterlings and they say, we want to start up in the Blue Mountains on the other side of the world, again, you're going to be like, oh, okay, well, I guess. So it's good. This is one of the reasons that I think it's good for you to say where you want to be, roughly, you know?
Yeah, and there's no stopping you from exploring, because I do believe that, and I personally think of scenes and ideas of certain encounters, social or combat, before I've even started planning a game, and those ideas can be very vivid and stick with you. And they still can be used. For example, you want Easterlings in your game, but your game is in the Blue Mountains. Perhaps one of the characters has a flashback towards the beginning where they had an encounter with the Easterlings a long time ago, and you explore that through that way. So you can still keep those ideas and execute them in different ways. But yeah, it is. I definitely think, you definitely need to pick where you want to go.
We got to pick what kind of game it's going to be.
Yeah,
that would be our next step before we get to the interest post and like making a definite decision on that. So like I would think, I mean, I know what kind of game I would run. It's going to be similar to most of my games, which is pretty open-ended with a sort of mission. So in this case, it would be you're in the region of blank and it is heavily oppressed by Marrow and the people are suffering, fix it.
Yeah.
That's sort of all I would give, I think, probably most of the time. But maybe it's better to have a better or a more clear goal in mind, you know?
I think that's smart, though, is to consider what is the mission. Not just saying, okay, all right, we're here, it sucks.
Yeah.
But saying there is the red sail market is carrying a valuable hostage to the Undying Light. And once they reach the region of Sphere, that person is going to be executed by the Lord of Ash there. So you have to stop them before they get to that point. Something that's focusing. It might even be good to consider every campaign. The start of every campaign is you're running a one-shot. Let's get this big adventure done. Let's do this bank heist. Let's solve this big problem. And then at the end of it, let's introduce a question. Why was this person valuable? What did this person have on them? Did you rescue them? What do they know? And in what direction is that going to lead in terms of a campaign or these themes that we listed here?
Right.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I think a lot of the time with one shots, you find yourself rushing to get to that point in a one shot. So I think to think of it as a one shot and then execute as a campaign is a very good way of looking at it, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, it never occurred to me before, but that's pretty smart.
Yeah, and I mean,
I don't
every
do it
game
often.
every game needs goals, doesn't it? And
Mm.
I think we all enjoy having as much liberty as possible to execute those goals. So yeah, I think that's a brilliant thing. So perhaps that is part of your conceptualization as well. What is the initial goal? Maybe not even necessarily for the whole campaign, but like to begin with, you know, the first thing, and then the fallout from what happens there then affects the next thing.
We could
Nice.
do because it's Dragon Grin and there's oppression everywhere. I mean, you can do the you are imprisoned escape.
Yes.
Or you are on the way to a salt mine that you're going to toil in for the rest of your days. Don't end up there. Or one of your number has been captured while you were sleeping. Save them. They know everything, you know? And they have ways of pulling secrets from mines because they have scary wizards and stuff. Like, there's lots of reasons that you have to go, oh crap, we have to do it right now.
What if we're starting with the first shot, to imagine it as a film, but the first image or idea that we deliver in the game is that boot pushing someone into the ground? What if the characters start off as deserters, people that desert because of what happens at the very beginning, so they have sort of like a perspective of both sides of the coin?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
I like
it could
that.
be a cool inciting incident where you are part of the oppression and you are pushed too far, and then you say no more of this.
No more.
But that'll also depend upon the tone of the group of players that you have, because something that would push a Marrow too far might be too far for your players also.
That's very true. There's a very fine line, isn't there, that has to obviously be discussed with your players before starting.
We'll also talk about, when we get to our Session Zero episode, about safety tools and stuff like that, and making sure that everyone's comfortable and that there are like lines and veils and things drawn so that if somebody is pushed too far in a position they don't want, that they can say, this is actually, I don't want to do this. But you can figure that out with your players beforehand, but like some way that of escaping the system that they're in and fighting against it might be a cool way to start a game. The other bonus of being Marrow is that they're pulled from everywhere, every culture, you know? Often the issue that I find when I play or run games is that I say, we're in this region, so everyone's from there, which is quite limiting mechanically sometimes, you know, or can be. If your players want to all play different races, which why would they not? Like, it can be quite limiting to be like, okay, well, we're in Gundlin, so you all have to be Gunlanders. Not necessarily everybody wants to do that, you know. So yeah, I think like Marrow is a good start point because you can be from anywhere, because they bring Marrow from, or conscript Marrow from all over Dragon Grin.
Perfect.
You can even, and you can decide again, what's the scope? That's such a good question to ask periodically throughout the process. What's the scope? Are they Marrow deserters? Are we going to play out them deserting? Or are these people who have been serving as double agents in the Dismembered Legion for 2 years at this point? And, you know, maybe they deserted years ago, if you really want to double down on the desertion.
It could be more than one of those things. It could be that some of them, or one of them, has been a double agent for a long time, and they've been sort of prying the knife and trying to get the others to sort of turn for a while, and then this incident is a thing where they see the chance to like really get them out of the Legion and into the Undying Light.
Nice. To keep it fun and exciting. Sorry, Rob. To keep it like really enticing and in media res, in your opening description of the game, and again, this might be too far. Obviously, we haven't even done Session Zero yet, but in the opening description, you're describing the person deserting, not the person facing that moral quandary where they have to decide whether or not they're going to desert. You've already made that call. They're going to play Marrow Deserters. So you see your friend on their knees. The execution is about to begin, and that was the moment you decided you were on the wrong side. How do you stop it? Like, really, it's a little forceful, but the first session, again, you're running a one-shot here. Let's propel the action forward.
I think the first session of all sessions is the one that can be the most forceful, the most like scripted to some extent, the most like defined, you know? because you're really setting like the tone of a game, you're setting the feel of it, you're like putting a lot of ducks in a row, sort of, you know.
Yeah. One of the themes that we come across quite a lot in the Dice cast is, and one of the things that we say quite a lot of the time is, don't give or ask players to make decisions that they have no control of the outcome over.
Yes.
If you're playing a game about deserters, don't give them the decision to whether they should desert or not at the beginning of the game, because
it feels
then
redundant.
it's just redundant and it's false and everywhere. And while everyone buys into it, and that I'm sure it can work and it'll be absolutely fine, it is also fundamentally a little bit of a waste of time because you've all agreed that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I think, Barker, that's the ideal point to begin a deserter game, is literally moments after the event has happened. Just to add a few more things into the idea of what deserters may be like. When I think of Dragon Grin, a lot of the time I think about Orwell's 1984, which is again about an oppressive regime. And one of the things that I really like about that story are the little things that people smuggle away from the regime and hide, little artifacts, little relics, whether it be little like books from an era after books have now been burnt, like in mass piles and things like that. So that could be like an inciting part of it as well, that perhaps there's a certain item that's been hidden away that is particularly relevant that they decided that they want to desert for, that kind of thing. I don't know.
I think that's well, first of all, Dragon Grin's filled with those sorts of relics,
Exactly.
and so it's very fitting. But I definitely appreciate that. Even simple items, right? Like it doesn't have to. Not everything has to be this huge, like rare arcan from the Titans that turns you into a cyborg. But it could just be one of the better food rations.
It's very human.
Yep. Or like a nice whetstone that you were given when you joined the Legion, or like something you took from home, some locket or something that you remember, or there's lots of things like that.
Yeah. Okay. What's next?
It looks like we know what the game is. It's you are Marrow Deserters. So you're from all over Dragon Grin. You were in this squad. Is it a squad of Marrow? Probably.
Oh God, I don't know. It's not like I wrote this.
It's a contubernum of legionaries, but I don't know.
It's actually it would be a skull. No crap. Okay, so I wrote this section because I do appreciate, like, I get some sort of fun deal out of like military organization.
Yeah,
like there are squads into platoons. There's fire teams in each squad. You know, like I just love that. So like there's a spine of marrow, which is a large quantity of marrow, but they're all kind of based on the bone structure of a body, which I'm so sad to say I can't remember exactly what they are.
Let's call it a hand or something of 5. You're in that. You're part of like a larger organization or whatever, and you have gone somewhere and you've been forced to basically put down a bit of unrest in a village, and this is the moment that you see is too much. And then the game from that point is you escape the Legion, or you try to, I guess. You're deserting. Then you're wanted immediately, right? Because desertion is illegal and you should be dealt with for that. How do they then become part of the wider rebel thing? Is one of them already a rebel? We talked about that.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Would that be a decision like you give them in the game? Can they rebel just on their own, or do they go and join a larger organization where they won't necessarily be making those calls on what happens?
We used to do in one-shots, we used to do these character hooks where the GM would write like A, B, C, D, pick one of these before you start for your character. And A is like, you've actually been a rebel you joined the Legion with the intent of infiltrating it, and you have been working now with this hand of Marrow for 2 years, and you've been working on all of them, trying to get them to see the things that the Marrow do that are evil, etc., etc., etc. So that's one of the things, and they have connections with the Undying Light or the Copper Jackals. I don't really know what the difference between those two things is.
All Copper Jackals are Undying Light. Not all Undying Light are Copper Jackals.
They're like a more elite inner thing.
They're the elites.
Yes.
Okay.
They're the elites of the Undying Light.
So you are, you're one of the Undying Light, and you have sort of joined with the intention of finding information. It's one of the hooks, and then another one is whatever, A, B, C, D, E. As many players as you have, you create these different hooks, so every player can kind of like pick a thing that they think is interesting before you start, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a definite inroad to one of them knows about the rebellion and knows how to get in contact with them afterwards.
That's nice because it gives everyone a specific role as well in the group and different ideologies about how things should be done. Because the discussion should be had about what you do really. Like they should decide in game what they do for sure.
You know what? That's smart. Coming up with some role examples. Because during the session zero, a player might be like, I want to play this other role that you never came up with. But it's a good idea to approach the table with 5 things. Hey, who wants to be the informant? Who wants to be the person who's been here for 2 years? And having that list, you'll get some people raising their hands immediately, really excited to jump in to those samples.
Right. Who wants to be the grizzled old veteran who is part of a Marrow dynasty and thought they would never leave the Legion? Who wants to be the person who... whatever, you can have all these different things that they can grasp onto or at least spark something, I guess. Okay, so then we know what our opening little bit is. What do we think the game turns into after that? What does a normal session of the game look like?
Let me see. I imagine it would be working out what. First of all, again, this would be a session zero question, really, because you'd want feedback on what sort of, if we're having these goals or missions or however you want to call them, like there'd obviously be input from them in that regard, I suppose, from the players. But I mean, the general session of a game, I should think, would be operations against the Dismembered Lord. I think that's probably the obvious one. Underground operations against particular regions, and maybe you pick a region that you feel you can undermine and draw more to your cause. So I would say that's probably that would be where I'd start, at least.
Yep, I think that's good. So then I think we have like the information that we need to approach players. I think like what I would do then would be I would like think about what the big threats are going to be to them. So if it's going to be other Marrow who are hunting them down, is there like a specific Marrow team who hunt down deserters? Is there like special squads and stuff within the Marrow who are like military police or whatever? Like think about that a little bit. Yep. Think about who, if anyone, is going to be the main antagonist. You don't have to like be sure about that, but just kind of start putting that in your brain, like thinking about those ideas. You
could even like start thinking about, come up with 3 antagonists. The lowly one, the captain that's chasing you with their platoon. The Arcseer, which is the servant of the Dismembered Lord that can kind of like see into your mind if they're in front of you. They're very Witch King-ish. So, and then beyond that is, the Dismembered Lord or some Lord of Ash or something like that in the region. And that way, once the Dismembered Lord's not going to worry about you. That Arcseer is not even going to worry about you because they have that captain there to worry about you and to take care of you. Yeah. Once you evade that captain for long enough, they're going to get punished and they're going to get replaced by someone who can do the job. And you can start working on those tiered villains.
I think it would be really good if the people going after you are from the same squad or the same garrison as the ones that you deserted. So the captain knows who you are.
Yep. Yeah,
nice.
That would be terrifying.
Some of you have been in the Legion since you were children, and they're like, both your captain and a father figure or something, or a mother figure. Yep, that would be cool.
I like that.
So then you have this information, you know basically what it's going to look like. Now you need to like distill this down into something you can tell your players about. And so usually, I mean, if you're in AbTab, you've seen a interest post before, but it's basically all the information that we just came up with. So what the game is called, what setting it is, what system it is, what level, if you're playing D&D or something similar, like what's the power level of the characters, when you're going to play, super important, though not necessarily in the scope of like these videos, but like that's a really essential part of like running a game. Then usually what I would do is I would write a blurb or like a little introduction about the game, so something in fiction. Find some art that fits, credit the artists in your posts.
I was going to say art is something too that really helps with conceptualization, because you can just look at a piece of art and immediately you have an idea for a session or a campaign. So that's very important. Yeah.
Yeah, and that then you would pick your players, and then you go to session 0 after that, I think.
Yeah.
Did it?
We did it. Can we close out with us doing this fun experiment and me just like using you as shameless guinea pigs that are going to help me develop this idea I've been thinking in my head for a while?
Yes.
This is usually something I might do in the session 0 when you're asking, and we were talking about this earlier today, Lloyd, about asking a player what they want for their character. Where do you want your character to end up? What do you want them to do? I want them to lead a charge of Rohirrim. I want them to, I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how or when, but I want them to be a part of a charge and be leading it. I want them to get, to reclaim the sword that was broken and have it reforged. Okay, that's cool. Like, right. And what I love brackets, like tournament brackets. I don't know how much of this you can see, but I cannot get enough of tournament brackets. I'm such a nerd for them.
No, it's good.
So this is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go from Lloyd to Rob to Lloyd to Rob, and I'm gonna ask you, what is more exciting to you in this moment that you would want to run? Not necessarily more epic or more grand, but what is more exciting to you that you want to showcase, a scene that you want to showcase with the players? Lloyd, the boot shove into the ground, into the mud, or the dinner with the enemy?
Those are both so good.
They are.
Dinner with the Enemy is my favorite RPG experience, so I'll go with that.
Okay, dinner. All right, Rob, a ship sinking or a prison escape, and you can just pretend that all of these things were player chosen during the session 0 if you want.
Of course. Can I be really contrary and say a prison ship sinking?
No. Yes. Yep, that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do
just because I think then you have to choose who you save. Like there's drama in that. Yeah.
I'm gonna make it prison ship. All right, so we're gonna do that. That's your one contrarian point that you had.
Fine.
And
that's
you spent
fine.
it.
That's fine. That's
fine. Okay. All right. So this is going to suck because that one's going to win. All right. So Lloyd, being buried alive, which in my Dragon Grin, #MyDragonGrin, that's what they do to deserters, is they strap your sword by the blade to your hand and until it is cutting you through your flesh, and then they bury you alive so you'll never abandon your post again. So what to you is more enticing, being a buried alive scene or a border crossing gone awry?
Buried alive.
Okay. All right, Rob. Smuggling an item that is illicit or dangerous to carry, or a roving bleak storm?
I would say smuggling an item
through a bleak storm.
No, I was gonna say, can you imagine like executing it like that scene in Glorious Bastards when they have people hidden under the floorboards, like a Quentin Tarantino build intention, like with Marrow searching you. So I would say smuggling an item, I think.
Nice. I like that too. And because again, it doesn't have to be something so epic. Like a bleak storm is epic, right? But so is smuggling. It's kind of rad. Okay, so we're gonna pretend it was just ship sinking because I have some ideas. Lloyd, dinner with the enemy or a ship sinking?
Dinner.
Okay. I love it. All right, Rob, being buried alive scene or smuggling scene?
Well, I'm going to pick mine, obviously. I'm going to pick smuggling. I'll pick smuggling.
Nice, good. All right, and then I am going to choose the last one, and I'm going to say smuggling the item, right? And so here's sort of the idea that I have, and we're again shameless guinea pigs over here. Smuggling is here, so I'm going to cross out every other instance of smuggling. Dinner is second place, so I'm going to cross out every other instance with dinner except for the last one. Prison or the ship sinking. Okay, nice, because prison is in parentheticals because we're going to talk about that. And buried alive. And so what we've done here is we've ranked them. We've ranked all of these things from smuggling to dinner with the enemy to one of two choices: a ship sinking or being buried alive, maybe depending on player choice. Because what's going to happen is this is where we're going to start the game. You're smuggling an item, and maybe you're going to get caught. You have to protect it from these maybe Marrow or these people who want to catch you with the item and take it from you or arrest you for it. And maybe depending on whether or not they catch you, the next thing that you'd want to progress to is maybe they offer you dinner because for some reason you're a special sort of prisoner. Maybe it was because of the object you were carrying. If the dinner goes well, they'll send you on a ship someplace and it's going to sink. If the dinner goes poorly, they're going to bury you alive. And then so on and so forth as you progress from the most enticing thing, the place you want to start now. In the words of Chris Perkins, stop putting off your cool ideas till later. Whatever you think is cool, do it now. Do that thing because you're going to come up. You should trust yourself to come up with cool ideas later. But if you, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a fear of railroading. If you manage this well, you've kind of created a cool little opening arc that the players might latch onto and be really excited about, or they might go a completely different way, but you have these scenes that you've drawn up, at least in your mind.
That's absolutely incredible. I love that.
Cool.
How useful and interesting, and how it involves everyone as well. That's really great.
This is called a story bracket. Story wheel, story bracket. I'm working on the story flamethrower pretty soon.
Oh my goodness me. I think we've done really well there.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me around.
Well, are you happy to stick around? Because as always, the dice cards of the Absolute Tabletop community. And if you're not a member of the Absolute Tabletop community, please head over there on Facebook now. We've been talking about Dragon Grin a lot today. Please head over to their website and check out that book because it is incredible. We asked about the conceptualization of campaigns, and we have some great questions. Do we have some in front of us already, Lloyd?
Yes, we do. Jeremy in the post asked, how do you dismantle ideas from various sources of inspiration in order to distill them into workable pieces? Incredibly good question. That is harder for like a homebrew setting where you are making it, because that's where all of those pieces end up. Like, oh, I really like Samurai, and I also really like the movie Troy, and I also recently watched a TV show about zombies, and all this stuff builds up in your head that you want to include in a setting. But how do you pick the bits that are worthwhile, and how do you like make them fit, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I suppose it's identifying the exact moments that make your hair stand up on the back of your neck and things like that. If you take the Trojan War, for example, we take the film Troy. Oh, I really like it when Hector and Achilles have a rad duel in front of the city. Well, then start the game by having the this really cool encounter happen where there's two individuals stood before the city gates having a cool fight or something. That's what I think. That's what you'd have to do. Identify exactly what you really like about that thing, and try and implement it into your game. What about you, Barker?
I think I agree, and I think that's kind of what we were talking about earlier about, you know, what's the scope, what is the mission, like what it, and it actually starts with, is this a game? You know, I wish I had a specific example of like some sort of, because he mentioned like third-party content that would be distilled down, like some sort of external, I think
various sources of inspiration.
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of times I like to attack it, just to offer a different take. I like to attack it by looking at the world that the game will be running in. So again, to take that USS Indianapolis example, a ship sinking and there are sharks. No, this is actually happening in Dragon Grin, and your pirates, Holmir pirates from Varnholm, and they're aboleths that are in the waters or something. So like, that's how you distill it, is because what I really want to showcase is the dread of being trapped in the water with monsters.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know how they're going to get out of it. Maybe someone's going to have to rescue them. Maybe they won't. But that's, you know, I think that looking at the broader scope of the world to determine how these elements in the media will take shape is a pretty smart idea.
I don't think you have to know either. I talked about this the other day with DBJ, that like you just make problems. You don't necessarily prep the solutions. The players think of that, and the solution they come up with is a good solution, even if it's not. You know, it's enough. Mm-hmm. I think as well, if you have like a bunch of ideas, like disparate ideas from different places, like if I run Harbinger, I've got like 20 sci-fi things that I like that I want to include. How do I pick the bits that fit or that work well? Like I think about Warhammer 40,000, which I like a lot in that setting, and I think about the bits of that setting that make it interesting to me, and it's like this weird, like, it's the tone. A lot of it is like, it's grim and miserable. It's a lot of like transhumanism, where priests of technology make themselves more machine because the flesh is impure or whatever. Like these kind of, or like there are superhuman soldiers who are not even human anymore. That stuff I like. So I take those themes and the ideas that fit well and that I think are interesting, without wholesale lifting from Warhammer the whole idea of a space marine. You can kind of take basic ideas of like, there is a super soldier, they wear big armor and they are scary. Like you can put that into your setting and it'll feel interesting without just copying and pasting a whole idea over. Similarly with like Dune or whatever in Harbinger, you can be like, I really like the idea of navigators. I think the idea that there's only one particular kind of person who can fold space or like find their way around the galaxy, that's amazing. I want to do that. And so you say, okay, there's a particular kind of Astra and you have to be this kind of mutant to do it or whatever. There's lots of ways that you can like take ideas that are interesting to you, tweak them a little bit so that they fit with other ideas that you want to include, and put them into your setting. So I think you kind of have to do that, because you can just say everything is here. All of the things that I like are in this setting, but I think that tends to make a very messy setting. You really have to like try and distill them.
Or a boring one. If you don't, if you don't distill it, like if you're taking a battle scene that you're really excited about, but you don't distill it down to the else that really Helm's Deep, right? The Uruk-hai that's charging the deeping wall with this torch. He's about to blow up the wall, and Legolas is trying to bring him down. That is an exciting moment. The whole battle is exciting, but it's because of those moments that the battle becomes exciting. And if you don't zoom in on those elements, you're just going to be describing, oh yeah, so like there are like people everywhere, and let me tell you, they're swinging swords. Let's just like imagine right. Getting almost hit over and over. It's like, okay, all right, I get it. I'm in a battle. You can really make it feel immersive by zooming in on those elements.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Okay.
Next one is from our good friend Keel, who says, in the conception phase before interest post, do you ever seek input from others on your campaign concepts, whether they're potential players or not? I really feel I should have done that with the Doctor Who game and the Batman game. Run it past a few people. That's probably a good idea, I'd say.
I do a lot, but I also tend to play with the same stable of about 15 people, maybe less than that usually. And so if I'm going to run a game for those people, if I know that, like with Old Ways, we finished one season of the game and we're going to do another one. So then I put up a post in the group being like, here are some times we could start in and blah, blah, blah. I think it's really good if you have the opportunity and you know who your players are, like to get their input on what kind of game they want as well, even before you say anything else. Because you also need them to be interested, you know?
100%. Yeah. You need their investment as much as yours. And that invariably, like, you're friends with these people and we have shared interests, like even beyond role-playing games. So I think, it's definitely key, but it also does happen naturally within gaming groups. What about you, Barker?
I've never. I'm in that moment where I'm like, oh man, I should do that. I should have done that a couple times. Like I think of these specific games where I'm like, yeah, I should have had a sanity check there. But I think that anything can be fun and enticing. But yeah, having that secondary person that you can just reach out to. I know that Matt Click and I have thrown ideas to each other, like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this sort of mecha hack game. I'm thinking about, I've been thinking about doing a Rogue Squadron game for a while. Hey, Keel and Gwen Reed are working on something like that, which is so exciting to me. But having that friend, and I think it's important that that person is a friend, not someone that you respect for their smarts, but someone who knows you, who knows your how you GM maybe, or knows your creativity, that you can ask like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? Oh, that's really cool. Or, oh, that might be really cool if you A, B, and C.
And even better if they can go, that sounds great, but will you still want to do it in a week? Like if they know that about you, for example, or, or like, oh yeah, that's really interesting, but maybe you should just write it down, like,
yep.
That's also great. Someone who's not afraid to say those things to you because you are the person who has 100 ideas a day, And
the person who will be able to say to you, okay, hey, have you thought about this potential problem? And then all of a sudden everything blows up. You're like, oh crap.
Or, okay, but what about the other 20 times you said this to me about other games recently? For example.
Shut up. Attacked.
Yeah, but I would say yes. If you can communicate with other people about the stuff that you're planning on doing, then all the better.
And all kinds of creativity, not just role-playing games. Yeah. Definitely always good to have sounding boards with from friends. Absolutely. Okay.
Do we have another one? Yeah.
From Nicolas Jacquette.
How do you create a sense of dread and despair for the players without penalizing them too much?
Lloyd, can you describe in depth the time you gave everyone 1 hit point?
Yeah. I ran a game of Isklof called Hunted, where they had lost a battle, a skirmish, and all of the players started on 1 hit point. No, I said they started with 1 hit dice, but they all rolled 1, which was hilarious. And so they had lost. They were without equipment. They were all of them injured, and they were like not weak, but they were like, as characters weren't weak, but they were weak in the moment. And so just the threat of dying was extremely high from the very start of the game. And there was like a normal guy, not like some great warrior, who had an axe. And that was like an incredibly tense encounter, because they had no real way to do anything about it. Like, I think Taylor's character was knocked unconscious in the first round of that fight, because she took some damage. That's a really extreme example of how you can do that. I think like in the game I ran at AdCon the other day, I like worked on tension a lot without there being an very obvious threat. Like the threat was obvious, but it wasn't being very loud about it. You can build up a lot of tension just by having things happen, which sounds like a cop-out, but just by creating a situation in which there could be danger and then not having the danger happen. Because the players are waiting for it to kick off, and if it doesn't kick off, then you just like constantly ramp up the tension of the moment, because they're always like, it's gonna be any second, I know it's gonna happen, and if it doesn't happen, people just lose their mind, I think, and it becomes very, very tense. So I would say, like, if you can create a moment of tension and just hold it and not resolve it. That's a very good way of creating that feeling.
Yeah, I think the important thing to consider with that as well is less is definitely more. Coming back to Jaws again, but the thing about Jaws is it's terrifying even when you don't see the shark. It's more terrifying when you don't see the shark.
Yeah, Alien
So I
too.
think an Alien, yeah. So suggestion of a threat is far better than like a lengthy description of the dangers that await them. But I think to push it more to the point of without like it penalizing them, I think there's the established. Like if you're playing an Iskloth, for example, or using that system for other games, it is agreed upon that when you're playing Iskloth that you already understand that if you get into a fight, then it is going to be incredibly brutal. It's incredibly high risk. You're likely not going to walk away the same person, if at all. And I think that's agreed upon at the very beginning. And that is all done through the random chance of die rolls. Which isn't penalization, it's just bad luck, it's just the fates. And I think if you agree upon that, then your players won't feel like they're being penalized at all. They know what they're getting into. And you could argue with that for a lot of role-playing games, really, that a lot of it does depend on the die roll, even though the circumstances are dire.
The reason that I like Dinner with the Enemy so much as a scene is because it's this whole theory just like distilled into one scene. The idea that like there is tension and it could go wrong at any moment and maybe it won't is like very powerful. And you're sitting with the bad guy who like is powerful or well connected or one of many things, and having this like you're having levels of conversation, because you're having a conversation which is likely polite, but you're also having a sub conversation in which you are trying to outwit them, and you're having another sub conversation in which you're trying to imply you are dangerous and they're trying to imply they are dangerous, and there's just lots of levels to the conversation that's happening. And I think that's a really good way as well of creating tension, which is why so often in Iskloft and Game of Thrones and things like it, people arrive under a banner of truce, or they eat the bread and salt or whatever it is, so that you create this sense of like nothing can go wrong here. There won't be violence, right? But still there really could be violence, and you end up with like a very tense situation.
And getting in murdered with a dinner knife.
It was a bread knife. For anyone.
Yeah. Sorry, but yeah, it was a bread knife.
Something to add there, because with my beautiful ghost saying dread.
Dread.
Now you mentioned no penalty, and I want to say that something that it could be said that Lloyd, your 1 HP example, that was a PC penalty, and if you ever do that, it should be a mechanical penalty against the party characters. You cannot really give off an air of dread by just putting a big monster in front of them, because it's kind of ingrained in players that like, oh, I can take that. Whatever it is, there's going to be some way I can take it. But if you have 1 hit point, freaking a bobcat chasing you is going to freak you out. Exactly. Like there's so, and that creates that dread. If you do not want to give any sort of mechanical penalty to the players, use the story to generate the dread. One of my favorite, there's literally an RPG called Dread, and it's my favorite game because it just uses a Jenga tower and it's all about this. But I ran a game once where you're on a spaceship, and in the far distance of this huge cruiser, on the opposite side of the cruiser from you, you kind of hear this noise, this explosion maybe, and then a few seconds later, it rumbles. Everything around you rumbles a little bit, and then it stops. And then next time it happens, it feels like it's closer. That slow, literal incremental increase or rather decrease in the distance between you and the threat in the story, as told by the story, zero mechanics involved, that creates that horror, that dread in, I think, a lot of players' minds, because, oh crap, how soon till the next time we hear that explosion? And it's even closer.
A lot of monster movies do this thing where they show you how scary the monster is without showing you the monster. So they establish that a character is good at fighting, and then the character is killed or something, right? Mm-hmm. These are the scariest Marines that have ever been, and then they get killed really easily by aliens. Or, you know. And so you can establish, without killing the NPC or the PCs, you can establish that this thing is very scary. Like, look at what it can do to these people. You're just lucky you haven't been targeted, sort of, you know. You can do the same thing with, in 5e, for example, like regional effects for a monster. So in Iscloft, a troll can appear in any fire within like 5 miles of its lair or something. So you can imply very quickly that like this thing knows where you are, it knows who you are, it knows what you look like, and it's watching you. Like, you can do lots of things like that that will make things more tense, increase the fear that it's there and it knows and it's powerful without you directly encountering it, you know.
Just realized I was muted. That's excellent. We have a question in the YouTube chat now from Tiet Drifter. Oh, I've just lost it. That is typical. Where's it gone? There it is. Would the type of mechanic, i.e. dungeon crawl versus sandbox, determine the setting as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think, well, not necessarily, but I think it can determine the kind of setting that you pick. If you want to do a dungeon crawl, then you're not going to pick Game of Thrones, Westeros, you know? Yeah.
So the question was basically, should the setting be admissible evidence in determining the theme, or vice versa?
Yeah, the type of game, I guess.
Okay, cool. I kind of subscribe to the idea that there's always a way to make it work. Like, yeah, it doesn't really work in Westeros, but you know what? Let's go beyond the wall. All of a sudden, my mind opens up a little bit, and I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe there's a dungeon up there. Maybe it's something that, before the Children of the Forest, etc. Like, maybe there was just something that we can explore that's absolutely arcane, or there's Essos.
I talked about this the other day as well, that like a dungeon crawl doesn't have to happen in a dungeon. Like, a dungeon crawl is really just like a type of game. So you can do a dungeon crawl in the wilderness, you can do it at sea, you can do it in a forest, you can do it in a desert,
castle,
like anywhere.
A lot of castles.
Yep.
In Westeros.
In a town, like, it's really just like there's a space you are in and you are following a certain route through it, is what a dungeon crawl is, I think, so you can do that kind of anywhere. So it's a style of game. So I think you could actually do it anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that. I mean, like you say, there are certain settings that absolutely lend themselves more to that kind of experience. But yeah, anything can work. And I think that's our lot. So
we did it.
Let's just say, first of all, Barker, thank you ever so much for joining us on the return of the Dice Cast. It's been amazing having you over to chat. Do you want to tell the people about the wheel that you were using before?
Oh, sure. There's not really. This is more, session zero pre-session stuff. So it was kind of cart before the horse. But basically, what this is a way to create creative chemical reactions. If we jump into, this right here, survival and gray morality, right? These are two completely different ideas, but on their own. But when I combine them, I come up with cannibalism, or cannibals, because that's the only way to survive. Actually, you know what? I'm going to make it cannibalism, because in that way you can have like a sort of Donner Party effect where, all right, we have to eat each other to survive. When I go to, let's pick betrayal and a looming threat, that one's pretty easy. I'm just going to do an assassin here.
Right.
When I go to pursuit and no good choices, I think that there's a trap. I think that I'm being run into a corner or some type. I think of like the Rohirrim having to choose between Edoras or Helm's Deep. That's like there's no good choices there, and they're being pursued by the Uruks. And ultimately, what we would do, perhaps in the distance, is after we have all of these thoughts written out, we take more specific things like the Undying Light or an Arcan relic, or an Arcseer, that evil bastard we were talking about before, or a sword, a special sword that I have in mind. And we take the story wheel, put it on the table, and we drop the dice literally onto the wheel, and then we create a new chemical reaction between those specific things and the items we've already come across. So in Arcan or cannibalism, and there's an Arcseer involved, that would create a different scene in our own mind than perhaps an Arcan mixed with cannibalism, or an Arcseer mixed with an assassin. This is a very short and very not great summary of what the story wheel is, but if anyone's interested in knowing more, there's stuff on the Mini Terrain Domain Twitch channel that we did during at Conline.
We'll check it out there.
Yeah.
Definitely check it out. Yeah, thank you ever so much for enriching our conversation, Barker. And I guess next time we're going to be back talking about Session Zero, sitting down with the players who have decided to come with you on this journey, and how you execute that effectively.
Yes, we'll also have a doc. We have like a Session Zero doc that we usually use, so I'll make up a blank one, and I'll put that in the description of the next video. We're going to do it again on Tuesday? ?
Yeah, I reckon so. Yeah.
Next week. Find us here again. Maybe this time, maybe later, who knows. But
join us next time.
Yeah.
On the Dice Cast.
Jazz hands.